Hi, I'm Abhay and welcome to another episode of PNT's Weekly Roundup. Joining us today is industry veteran Mr. Balaji Rao, with whom we will be discussing the latest real estate news, stories, and how they've impacted us all. According to a recent forecast, India's top 7 markets are expected to add approximately 16 million square feet of Grade A retail space by the end of 2026. For the last few years, demand has considerably outpaced new supply, leading many to believe that the new supply will also be absorbed fairly quickly. However, with the rise of e-commerce, do you still think there'll be such a high demand for retail growth going ahead? And the second part of the question was, at the moment, India has only one retail REIT that people can use to invest, Nexus Select Trust. Do you think there'll be a few more emerging in the coming years on account of the retail growth?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because if you look at the stock of grade A retail space, it has not been much. It has hovered around real grade A plus around 70 million square feet, total maybe around 90 to 100 million square feet in India. So naturally, there's been only one REIT, and that's Nexus Select Trust, which has about 10 million square feet under its AUM. So now the question comes whether we usually add about 10 to 12 million square feet every year in retail space, and that gets absorbed. So this year we are expecting a little bit higher, 15 to 16 million square feet, which will also get absorbed. Now, the question which you have posed is whether the rise of e-commerce or quick commerce is going to impact the absorption of retail space. Now, in my opinion, retail is still a far way when it reaches the saturation point, when people say that, look, beyond this, it's going to be tricky because a lot of people will depend upon e-commerce or quick commerce or whatever you have online to be able to satisfy their needs. But even today, if you think about it, even if you don't go to a offline shop for actually buying something, for anything which you want to have a feel and touch experience, you would still have to go to an offline store. Okay, so unless you're buying something which is a regular purchase, like a consumable, and you know the brand, you want that protein shake or something, that's a separate issue. But if you're buying a fridge, you're not going to buy your old fridge only again. You're going to want to see what is available in the market, and everything cannot be only on the screen. It has to be a feel and touch. So there's certain, even consumer durables or high value items, they're all high touch items. They're not going to be easy for somebody to say, look, I don't have to see it at all. So even as an experiential center, which is what big companies are doing, if you see Apple, Samsung, they have huge experiential centers where they want you to come and experience their products and then decide what you want to buy. So even that is still a long way to go in India, because we are not talking only about the 7 top cities. We also have grade 2 and grade 3 cities. So when you go into the tier 2, tier 3 towns and cities, you will have a lot more absorption. So all together, are we asking whether retail has already got fully saturated in India? Far from it. We are nowhere near it. So all this will be absorbed and much more, definitely. They will all have a change in the sense they might not all be selling so much, but they might become experiential.
Experience centers,
Okay. Will supermarkets still exist? Of course, because they depend upon visual merchandising. So sometimes when you want to look at new products, malls do exist, yes, because it's a whole day experience, entertainment experience. So all this will still be there. Food courts, malls, theaters, I don't see it disappearing. And they will all be absorbed. Coming to the second part of your question, if retail is going to do very well, then how does a retail investor participate? Correct. So earlier, retail investors used to participate in in high street stores. You buy a store and you rent it out.
Right.
And depending on your capacity, you can even buy a space for an ATM and rent it out to a bank. But today, as high street is struggling to maintain its preeminence over malls, it's better to be in the mall business, people will think. And in the mall business, REITs will come up. This is the first harbinger of further to things to come. And I'm quite sure there will be further retail REITs where you will definitely see these investors being able to jump in and do something. As well as when you look at SME REITs which have come in, which are of a smaller corpus of 500 crores, they
Correct.
can also go into retail. They need not always be commercial. So there will be retails which will happen, retail REITs which will happen, not only in the mega space, but also in the SME space. And this will allow retail investors to participate in this growth story of retail industry.
Right, because we'll have the same steady income coming in from the big renters in
Oh,
grade
yes.
A malls as
In
well,
fact,
like
there
just as
might be a
commercial, right?
better upside in retail as compared to commercial. Commercial, the rentals are far more sticky. They don't
Correct.
change for 3 years. Whereas in retail, some part of the rentals can be linked to turnover,
Correct.
can be linked to sales. And so you can have a fluctuating income. So a REIT unit holder, as we call it, the investor, he can expect sometimes a better return in retail as compared to commercial. But will the better return come with a slightly higher risk? Of course. There's always a risk return parity which you cannot take away.
Correct. This month, we saw LIC Housing Finance launch India's inaugural listed residential mortgage backed securities, RMBS, on the National Stock Exchange. What do you think of these? How do you think they're going to impact our housing market?
Well, it's like this. What happens in a very developed market is there are sourcing companies, mortgage sourcing companies. So typically HDFC Bank or earlier HDFC, LIC Housing Finance, all other housing finance companies or banks, they are sourcing. They source the housing finance or the mortgage loans.
Okay.
And then what happens is after a certain age of the loan, that may be 3 years, maybe 5 years, when you see its credit quality, based on that vintage of how many years it has been there, how well it has performed, they can be packed into mortgage-backed securities. R stands for the residential bit, but it
Correct.
can be anything. So, a residential mortgage-backed security. So, what is its use? So, now for that sourcing company, it allows its balance sheet to become lighter. Because suppose a sourcing company has to grow and it has to carry that mortgage for its entire life of 20,
20,
25
25
years,
years,
then
right?
its balance sheet has to be pretty bloated. But suppose it can offload after 5 years a block of mortgage backed loans, then its balance sheet becomes lighter and allows its capital to take on more further growth and expansion. So there's always a sort of a relay race for these mortgage backed securities which happens, and that's how the market gets deepened and widened. And when it gets listed on the national stock market, then even retail investors can sometimes participate in that because this is
Correct.
a very steady income coming through. Okay, so I have a feeling what we are seeing is the advent of sophistication of a finance industry when people are being able to pass on these mortgage backed securities to other institutional investors who can take it and keep it, and who in turn can list it and also provide liquidity for themselves by bringing in retail investors. It already existed in the institutional market, but now by bringing it and listing it on the
On
NSE,
NSE,
you're
yeah.
bringing in even retail investors to participate in it.
Correct. But the only drawback or fear most people have when it comes to MBS is what we saw in the 2008 global financial crisis, wherein the quality of mortgage and credit being sold was so low that it literally led to an entire collapse in the economy. So, do
Yeah.
you think India is in a better position to regulate these products?
Of course, because you see, the problem which happened in what we call the global financial crisis and what sparked off it was called the subprime mortgage. Okay, so they were almost like junk bonds, they were subprime and they were being clubbed with a little bit of prime. and their character and quality being changed in a way to make it look AAA or AA and then being sold. Okay. I don't see Indian regulators allowing that sort of a depth or sophistication yet to come in, where you take on junk bonds. So I believe what will be sold in the secondary markets will be of a much better credit quality first to establish the market. You don't want to destroy the secondary market by selling junk out there. Correct? So
Correct.
this happens a few decades down the line when people become more and more sophisticated and they become more smarter and they want to somehow, get more liquidity out of a particular security. And when it gets unwound, then there's a problem. There's
Right.
also a second reason I'll give you. In the American market, when this happened, please understand that the American mortgages are without recourse. That means when an American home buyer borrows money to buy his house, the house is the only collateral he puts up. It's not his personal guarantee.
Correct.
There are no personal assets. So what happens is, because it is without recourse to him, when the house value goes below the mortgage outstanding amount, he has a right to walk off. And the banks have to take the hit because they can only take back the house and now its value is below his outstanding amount. So they take a hit. In India, we don't do without recourse. In India, when you take a housing loan, you're also giving your personal guarantee. Sometimes you have a guarantor. So they will come, not just because the house has to yield that money. If it doesn't yield, they'll come that you have to make good the difference by paying from your personal savings. So it's far more difficult in India for a borrower to walk away from a house because it is with recourse. So all this will prevent us from going through such a crisis as we saw in US.
Correct. So basically, one should just look at this as a good alternative investment for the moment. Then.
Absolutely. It's a good alternative. It deepens and widens the market and it gives a shot in the arm for housing financial institutions to have more liquidity now to go
Correct.
and do more business, to scale it up.
The Maharashtra government recently announced it would offer access to concessional loans for self-redevelopment. Self-redevelopment is still at a very nascent stage, and only a handful of eligible societies have opted for redevelopment, even in cities like Mumbai, and even fewer have managed to do it successfully. So, what do you think are the challenges self redevelopment would pose? And will this encourage more people to go in for redevelopment if they feel they might benefit from it, not just as personally with their house upgrading, but maybe financially as well?
See, this is a perplexing sort of an issue which we are all facing because most buildings that are eligible for redevelopment and are trying to go for redevelopment. Now, the easier way out is to go to a builder who does all the dirty work for you. Like he does the
Correct.
designing, the execution, the free market sale of the additional flats and everything. And that's pretty much easier on everyone. But what the Maharashtra government does and the local bodies want to do is they want to develop the concept that why don't the residents themselves come together as they're already a cooperative housing society and redevelop their own building? Why do they have to go to a builder? And if I can give you concessional finance, they're even promising a single window clearance, for example, then it's so much more easier.
Right.
But the question out there is the whole concept of a cooperative housing society being able to take such decisions is a bit complicated because in most cooperative housing societies, you see factions, you see dissension, you see
Right.
division. So they don't come together. Nobody trusts each other. So even if you make a committee, even if it is well supervised by project managers and legal consultants, nobody trusts. And the worst thing that can happen to any project, any real estate project, is getting stuck in a mess halfway through.
Correct.
That you don't cross the whole thing, you go halfway and you're stuck
A stalled
because of some
project, yeah.
sort of a litigation.
Right.
Whereas when a developer comes, naturally he's more powerful and everybody agrees and listens to him till the building is over. So that becomes easier, but naturally the developer also takes his pound of flesh, which can be available to the old residents if they do it themselves. But can they do it themselves? That is the question mark. I feel wherever it's a smaller building, a more closer knit cooperative housing society, and the presence of a clear leader who is strong enough to run the society affairs, then they should go for self redevelopment. Wherever you try to do larger, complicated developments, cluster redevelopment, then you will have the number of members many, number of societies many, then the concept of self redevelopment shouldn't be even tried. So, though it is being encouraged, it's good in smaller buildings, in where fewer members are there, where there's clear leadership, they can take advantage of the concessional finance, of the single window clearance, and then do this effortlessly.
MMRDA recently announced plans to repurpose underutilized cycling tracks across BKC into vehicular lanes with the aim to expand the current road capacity by 600 to 900 vehicles per lane. This initiative is anticipated to reduce peak hour travel times by 40% and reduce carbon emission by 30%. However, that seems almost counterintuitive given the repurposing of cycling tracks was to encourage and reduce carbon emissions. And that is why the cycling tracks were created in the first place. But now we seem to be repurposing them in order to achieve that same goal. So, do you think something went wrong with the original planning, or will we be in a what can be a better solution from discouraging private vehicles in congested areas and CBDs like BKC to reduce the environmental and traffic load?
See, you have to understand one thing. When the cycling tracks were made, I think they were a bit ambitious. Okay, because Bombay was never a cycling city. You know, nobody was cycling to Nariman Point also or Ballard Pier. So why do you think they'll cycle to BKC? It's a hazard to cycle. The roads are so tricky. There are so many potholes, you know. So I don't see how cycling will take off in Bombay. That's one. Two, to emulate blindly a New York or a London or a Amsterdam is not the best of things. Look at our climate. By the time the poor guy comes in a train or in a bus, he's anyways sweating it out. So he prefers to come in an air-conditioned train. They are on the upswing. If you see their occupancy and usage, they'll come in an air-conditioned bus. They prefer to come in the air-conditioned cars rather than try and cycle it. And then where are the facilities in the office where he can come and take a shower? He'll have a locker and he can change into office clothes. These are not there. So to ambitiously say we will just have a cycling track was a little bit ahead of its time, first. Two, were there cyclists there? No. So to say that this is a counterintuitive or counterproductive is not correct, because anyway it was not being used. It was only being used to park cars, and that too illegally. So if they're going to bring that into play by making an additional lane for vehicular traffic, that is much better, isn't it? Than just leaving it wasted there, just saying that someday someone will cycle. Okay? So I think it is a good move. I think it's a practical move to really address the concern today in BKC. BKC's concern has been always terrific congestion, which is a problem with most CBD areas. Most of the developed cities have brought in the concept of congestion tax. Okay?
Right.
So, which means that when I go into a CBD area, automatically they'll pick up and my FASTag or whatever it is would be debited. So, if I'm going to get debited by say a $500 every time I go into a CBD area, I'm going to think twice about taking my car. I might start taking the metro. I might start taking a bus. I might start carpooling. So these sort of measures have to be brought in to bring down the traffic density in BKC. And you can do quite a few of these, you understand. Especially with the metro now coming into BKC. Okay? We are on the anvil of seeing public transport getting better connected with BKC. And if that happens, as is happening as we speak, I would tend to believe that by putting a congestion tax, you are going to deter motorists and motor car owners from using their cars all the time, from bringing their cars into the CBD
Main
areas or
CBD
these
area,
congested
right.
areas. So there are ways to tackle it, and just putting a cycling thing doesn't work.
So you feel the taxation method that cities like London and all have used might work better for us, no?
Absolutely. I think
Yeah.
we should have a congestion tax. I think there should be various measures which we should have to bring down the number of vehicles on the road any particular day. Yes. And two is, I think we should follow more stricter traffic rules. We should have more one-way streets. We should have more pedestrian plazas. So there are a lot of ways to control it. The problem is we don't have that self-regulation, like jaywalking. It's all over the place. How can you do that?
That's a wrap for this week's episode. Thank you all so much for joining us. Hope you all enjoyed the episode. Please leave your thoughts and comments on the comment section below. Hit the bell icon for further notifications and do like, share, and subscribe. Thank you.